And imagine if someone listened to like the first couple of episodes, like these guys take this stuff seriously, and then they downloaded this episode.
It's kind of like, Harry, you're a wizard now, and that's essentially what this movie is, just with assassins and bullets.
Were there balls hanging out of the back? Because those rats had big balls.
Is the dumbest plot point of any movie ever.
Cauliflower rice.
Your grandparents liked Tank Girl?
You mean it all weaves together in the loom?
I don't even know where to go from there.
It's going to show up in your face and it's not going to go away.
Hello and welcome to Movie
Hello and welcome to Movie Smash, the podcast that looks at comic book movies outside the MCU that you may or may not remember. If you're the type of person that enjoys talking about hidden gems or just likes to tear old movies apart, this is the place for you. And with that, let's get started. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Roberts. I'm the founder of Off Panel Creations. And with me today, I have Jeremy Parmentier.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Parmentier of the Retrovaniacs podcast, Subtastic Band, and the world's worst assassin.
And Fergel Amayo.
I would be the last one. I'll follow it up. I'm Fergel Amayo. I will create the introduction. Founder of Gotham Nice Comics, resident nerd, all things enjoyable, and really do think this is a great, I'm going to say, comic.
Well, we might disagree on that one. So today's movie is 2008's Wanted. It stars James McAvoy, Morgan Freeman, and Anna Gina Jolie coming off her Kung Fu Panda fame. Directed by Tim Moore. I cannot pronounce his Russian last name.
Bekabamatov?
I guess that's what it is. So Russian. This was actually his first American film.
And this is me, Wesley Gibson. Nobody. Like everybody else, I just keep waiting for a lotto ticket out of my boring existence and into a life that means something.
Shoot the wings off the flies.
You're insane.
Insanity is coasting through life in a miserable existence when you have a caged lion locked inside. The fraternity has trained assassins for thousands of years. Every life hangs by a thread. We are that thread. Wanted.
Before we jump into the movie, guys, how familiar are you with the source material?
Well, first off, I will say that Timur actually has two really cool movies that I would recommend anyone to watch. They are subtitled Night Watch and Day Watch. They are so fresh. So I'm just going to leave it there. I was very familiar. I actually loved this comic book. Just as much as I loved The Watchmen, I love this book because it was so outlandish, so outrageous, and it was amazing.
Before watching this movie, I did not know this was a comic. I went back and picked up, after doing our Constantine episode where everyone's like, yeah, well, it had nothing to do with, it's totally different than the source material or whatever. I went out and I found the Wanted trade and I read it kind of while I was watching it, and I don't recommend doing that. So just from the get-go, I did not know the comic. Now I do, and I'm still surprised this is a movie based on that comic.
It's funny you say that, Jeremy. I was the same way. Until we picked this movie, I had no idea that this was a comic, except for when Fergal, you mentioned it during our what episode was that one?
It's a Kingsman. It's a Miller World story. It actually all interconnects into the Miller World universe.
Exactly. And so I had no idea. And Jeremy, I did the same thing as you. I went out and picked up the trade back for this so I could read it as I was going along. And as a viewing experience, I can start off by saying I do not recommend that at all.
Agreed.
So do you guys remember when you saw this movie for the first time?
So when it came to theaters, I was like, okay, well, first off, as I said, I've read the book and I'm actually like, the characters are so well thought out. It's the premise is uniquely different, like a villain's version of Watchmen. So the characters I thought were just really unique. And once I thought, oh, this is going to be a great movie. Then I go to the movie and I'm like, it's an Angelina Jolie movie, and they got Morgan Freeman in here, and they got James McAvoy. So they got great actors, and they just didn't even bother to read the comic book. Maybe the first pet chapter.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that later. But as far as what do I remember when I first saw the movie? Yes, it was January 5th, 2024.
Yeah, I saw this movie. I think it was on DVD or Blu-ray a long time ago. I do not remember when, where I was, but I had seen the movie beforehand. And I do remember when I saw this movie, I really just viewed it as another Angelina Jolie action flick. She was just coming off her Tomb Raider run. And I thought it was going to be more like that, and surprised it was more like that. What do you guys remember about the movie itself before you jumped into this? Obviously, Jeremy, not for you because you didn't see it before this.
I don't know. I thought the movie it was good for what it was, right? I mean, if you just didn't bring the title Wanted and you went with a completely different story and just a different title and do whatever you want, it would have been a good movie. So as a standalone movie, it had. I mean, it was a bit messy, but good, right? Not horrible, but the fact that they based it on something so awesome and they didn't even bother to make that movie that would have been that, I think it was a missed opportunity.
Well, I was going to say, while I didn't see this before, I understand exactly what Fergel's saying because for video games, I say this all the time. There are sequels to games that are actually really good games, but because they're not as good as the game that's in that series, my favorite example is Castlevania 64. The first Castlevania game for the N64 is one of the worst Castlevania games you'll ever play, but it's not a bad game. If they would have called it anything else, Spooky Castle, it would have been a great game. People would have said, hey, I actually enjoyed this game. It was really interesting. I like this, this, and this. But instead, because you expected something else and then you saw this, you were kind of like, this isn't very good. I've ruined my experience watching this movie because I did read the trade with it. So I think if I would have not done that, if I would have just watched the movie on its own, I think I would have a better outlook on this movie. But instead, it's just completely not what I expected, even reading it concurrently with the trade.
So we've sort of alluded to the source material a little bit, but Fergal, do you have any sort of background for us on this?
Yeah, so this was real. As I said, this is part of Mark Miller, his Millerverse, Wanted, Kick-Ass, the whole nines in that regard. And this is basically what would happen if the comic material is a great story. Actually, won numerous awards, and it was really based on what would happen if supervillains won the world. And actually, fun fact, it was based on some DC supervillains and different characters in the DC universe, and even some Marvel ripoffs. And so, the idea was that, this kid is supposed to take over for his dad, who was the famous killer. And that's really what Wesley Dobson was supposed to be, the son of the famous killer. And so while they got that part right, and I think James McAvoy, even in the interview, said he was the only one that actually read it. Like, I think you could tell he read the material, but that's where it's supposed to go off in a completely different direction. There's a point to it, and there's a point in the end, and I think that's where the ball got dropped in this movie. That's why it's like a hard movie to remake or do things with.
Before we jump into the movie, just a quick spoiler warning. Just a heads up, we'll be discussing the plot of this movie, what little there is, and with that, may discuss some elements of the story that might be considered spoilers, so consider yourself warned.
But I will say, if you're worried about it because you like the trade so much and you don't want us to spoil parts of that, don't worry about it. Nothing we're going to talk about is going to talk about the trade at all, as the story is 100%.
You're in good hands when it comes to that.
We might talk a little bit about the trade, about the differences between them, but you're right. If you just watch this movie, you would not be spoiled on the trade, nor if you read the trade, you'd be spoiled on the movie.
No, not at all.
Agreed.
This movie follows Wesley. He's a young man, he's a frustrated office worker, and he all of a sudden discovers he's a son of a professional assassin, and this lineage comes with it some superpowers. It's kind of like, Harry, you're a wizard now. And that's essentially what this movie is, just with assassins and bullets.
I've never heard it quite explained that way. Harry, you're a wizard, but rather than a wand, here's a gun and some bullets. Have a great day.
That's basically this movie in a nutshell. So let's go into it first. Let's talk about the characters a little bit, because that is where I think I wouldn't say it shines, but there are definitely some interesting characters in this movie.
I only think that Wesley, the main character, has any sort of depth to him. I mean, we mentioned how it's based loosely on the original trade. Wesley's probably the closest if you only read the first book, right? Only the first comic, and then wrote the rest without reading the rest. He keeps that same kind of, he's kind of out on his luck. He seems to have a pretty tragic life. It's not like super tragic. It's just very mundane, right? It's like
girlfriend banging his best friend type situation. Like, yeah, I get you.
It's an Office Space kind of feel, right? And it's very much that feeling to it. But then, he kind of, in this movie specifically, he keeps saying he's sorry. And then even once he becomes like a better assassin, he keeps saying he's sorry, right? That's like his gimmick catchphrase. He's kind of like this kind of goofy character you kind of like, even though he's going to eventually become some kind of super assassin. You still kind of like him because he's got these like little quirks that you kind of identify with. I thought he was fine. Everybody else in this movie, I felt like there was, they gave him a note card with several words on it, and they gave him no other background. It just said, like Angelina Jolie is basically the other main character, I suppose, of this movie, the Fox, and she's barely fleshed out. If it wasn't for the fact that they had that one like momentary scene where she explains her background, there would be nothing let you know anything about her other than that she's kind of hot and she has a gun, right? That's it. That's all you know about her, and that's all you need to know.
Well, so I think you built that up, Jeremy. I think there's not much we can say beyond that, except for the fact that she is hot. Angelina Jolie in this movie was really hot. The tattoos were very well. I think you had characters like Morgan Freeman. You had a lot of wasted potential, right? So that's Morgan Freeman was supposed to be the professor, if there was anything, but then it just all the other characters I don't even think were in the comic, right? If they were supposed to represent characters, I actually think they invented every one of these characters for this movie. As a matter of fact, they did. The rat catcher, all of it.
If you look at the gang, yes, all the people that are in the gang that are kind of in his training montage, those are one panel or two panels on the source material in the second issue that they've fleshed out into characters, right? And they aren't following the same people. It's not the same event, but there's like the butcher guy. See, he's in there training him how to use knives, and then there's the people showing him how to use guns, and that guy, like, so those characters are there sort of, but yeah, like the rat catcher guy, which is kind of a high and low point for the movie, not in the comic, but probably the coolest thing in the movie, to be honest.
Really, really interesting guy. And I have to say, the one thing that wasn't in the material that I loved was the jump through the thing scene, like the whole jump through the building when the guy is breathing back, and then the beginning of the movie, and they got the assassin, he's jumping through the building, and he gets shot at the end, like because the other guy is trying to kill all the other assassins. I thought that was probably the best scene of the movie.
That's in the comic, just a different version of it.
Yeah.
We'll get into that a bit, but actually it's funny. You guys keep talking about Wesley. Wesley, I viewed him as really being a watered down version of Ed Norton's character in Fight Club.
Yeah.
He's narrating it. He's sad and pathetic. He even has a line about IKEA furniture. And then he's supposed to be, and of course, at the very end of the movie, he does that edgy thing where he talks to the audience and breaks the fourth wall. But yeah, he really felt like Ed Norton's character from Fight Club for me.
Now that you say that actually makes more sense than Office Space, but it's still the same feel. Office Space still fit because it was kind of just making all the scenes in the beginning when he's in his office, his boss is yelling and everything else. It was very much Office Spacey, but yes, then it does have that turn. Also reminded me of Falling Down a little bit, where it's kind of, you watch this guy,
Michael Douglas, yeah,
kind of fall apart, but it's not quite the same. Instead he loses it and becomes a super assassin, but it's the same kind of feel to it.
It was Janice and the Stapler that did it.
That's it. Yeah.
It's always a stapler, right, with Office Space. So I watched an interview with Millar, and he said Wesley was supposed to be the dark reflection of Spider-Man. Instead of great power comes great responsibility. It's great power. You can do whatever you want.
Well, I was going to say that in the trades, I can more see that, right? In the trades, especially, after he kind of gets this ability, he just does all the worst things you can imagine, right? He has this power and he does all these, but in this movie, Wesley is not that. He doesn't take that arc. Even he has his first actual job to kill, and he doesn't take it because he's like, I don't know why I would be killing this guy. What did he do wrong? I'm just doing it because I'm told to. Like that. That's not the route that Wesley takes in the trade at all.
No, and that's what the whole point of it. I think that's where the comic. And I didn't actually read I only read the full on trade, and maybe I missed the scene in the trade. I was rereading that back. Maybe I missed the jump through the building scene. I might have. I've been tired lately, but I will tell you that, like, to your point exactly, Jeremy, his complete arc was taking him and removing him from all of the moral constructs of society, and and that was part of the fraternity's secrecy because they could get away with it. They controlled the 5 supervillain families, controlled the world. They got rid of every and any superhero, and they basically can do whatever they want.
Yeah, the story, the source material is very much a sort of a dark reflection of the Watchmen. Instead of being a deconstruction of superheroes, it's what if villains took over the world, and I felt it was more of sort of like an edgelord version of it. But this movie, it's like they felt like they didn't read the whole trade. They just sort of they're setting him up to be a hero. So he went the hero arc, but in the comics, he goes very much a villain arc with everything.
Well, and I think, I bought this, I mean, at Goodwill. I didn't like rush out and find this online. It has like a 2-disc set and a little booklet inside. So after I watched this, I read the little booklet, and at least according to the director, he decided that he wanted to, make this movie, and this is what he wanted to do, based entirely on reading the first issue of this series, and the rest wasn't finished yet. So he started writing his like treatment of what he thought this would be based on his impressions of where he thought the story was going to go, which is why it's 100% different. By the time it was finished, the whole trade was out, and I guess he could have rewritten it, but he didn't. Instead, he just went with what it was, and what we have is a movie that's completely separate from the source material, to the point where all the things that Fergel just said about the 5 families and none of that's in this movie. Not one piece of it is in this movie.
No, which would have made, I think, and this is my point exactly. This is why Watchmen can still spawn off into different remakes. If they would have followed the material, I think you would have had a great follow-on story. You could have gone completely wild on it. And the director, because of the movie, which previous to this movie, which is Night Watch and Day Watch, which is vampire stories, vampires and other bad guys, and just a really cool. I'm not going to go into it, but that's when if simply just get that material right, you could have had a great spawn-off movie, and I think it would have sold well.
I'd have to disagree with you on that one. I think the source material is not a filmable document. I don't think that would have any general appeal. The amount of money it would take to make that thing happen, even with CGI, I don't think you have an audience for it, because it's not your sort of general audience that is required for these large blockbuster movies.
I think it would have been a very interesting television series. In the same way that they made, the Watchmen TV series has nothing to do with not nothing, but a very loose tie to Watchmen. But there's other shows and series that you have time to build up background that could have worked. But as a movie, you're right. I think it would have been way too much to cram into an hour and a half. And also, again, without a giant budget, unfilmable. There's too much going on there. It goes, even from the very beginning of the second issue, it kind of goes so crazy as far as what they'd need to do. The second issue starts with like that giant, they have other names to refer to him, but basically Bizarro Superman is there. Like
Dumbwit.
Right.
Dumbwit. Fuckwit is his name.
Right,
Fuckwit.
and they call him other things too that are much worse that I'm not going to repeat. But the point is, he is like that's from the get go. You're like, wait a minute, there's this giant kind of disformed Superman. There's all these other things that go into that background. It's crazy. It totally works for a comic book. It could work for a series, but you'd need to have the time to really build that out. I think for a movie, it would be too much.
Well, and I don't know, maybe I might disagree with you guys, because remember, we said the same thing about Watchmen, and I think Watchmen is the exact opposite, and that budget was equally as large. That budget probably, to translate even the Osterman vision into reality and all the other characters and everything that went with that was an expensive movie. So I think, it might have found an audience, and I think today it definitely would find an audience. I think it would, I just think it would find an audience based on the current kind of IP fatigue, if you will, related to Marvel and DC.
Yeah, but I think the boys did it better. If you're looking for like the villain arc, dark superhero, supervillain thing, I know we're here to talk about the movie Wanted, not the source material Wanted, but I think Jeremy's right on that. A series might be able to pull it out, but it looks like it's just, if you're actually true to the source material, it just feels like it's being edgy for the sake of edgy, if that makes sense.
It does, and I can understand that, and I think that maybe a TV show to introduce, maybe, and again, I think there's a boys movie coming over the horizon anyway. But to your point, like this particular movie though, it's a one shot. It has to be a one shot. It really, and that's what left me kind of wanting. Funny play on words. Left me wanting at the end of the movie, because I'm like, okay, he's like killed everybody and he's destroyed the entire organization. What next?
So why don't we change gears a little bit and start talking about the special effects for this movie? What do you think?
Awesome. Pretty good. I thought they were really good. I thought the slow-mo effects, Teamer's good at this stuff. I think he did a pretty good job at some of the slow-mo effects. The loom was really cool. The curved bullet was awesome. There were some pretty cool scenes. I thought it was really, one of the things I thought was really interesting was that little clay thing that everybody healed in like hours. I was like, is that real? Can we do that? Because God bless America. Let me find one of those.
I don't know if that's real or not, but I did think that was pretty cool. It looks like it was covered in wax almost that breaks kind of towards the end. That I liked. There's a lot of slow-mo, and I thought it was done very well. This is very much, I don't know. A lot of movies from the same time frame have this same kind of effect on everything, and it works. It looks well. It looks good here. It doesn't look really cheap. It's not constant. But it doesn't have incredible action scenes other than that, right? You need those effects to make these action scenes work for the most part. There aren't like really good fighting scenes like when we talked about The Kingsman, where they had some really, really good fighting scenes. This is more just like really good effects shooting scenes, because that's what his skills are.
Yes. Yes. And I think the thing that really kind of strained credulity was, is the idea that you get your ass beat enough that you learn how to fight?
Well, I wasn't even sure at first. Did the guns give him the power? I realized it's not like by the end of it, I was like, no, they were training him fast. But it's like he gets the gun at first, and it's like shoot the wings off these flies, which is something that's in the book, and and he does. But I was like, how would he do it? He's never fired a gun before. He just fires. I was like, oh, maybe the gun gives him these powers. But no, no. Instead, they just beat his ass a bunch till he's good, which in real life doesn't work because I'm still not a very good fighter.
Well, they said in there that it's due to his heart rate goes faster than the average person, so he can slow down time mentally and pull it off. They just need the adrenaline kick to make that happen. They did explain that after he shot the wings off the flies. No, I think the training scene, I will get in that a little bit too. I think it should work because I'm trying that with my son right now. So, well, hopefully it turns out well.
Oh, are you really trained? So I might have to do that. We might have to do the loom. Colin, I need you to do this loom. Grab that pitch, slow it down, and then we'll grab that pitch. Don't worry about the cuts. We'll get you to the emergency room. I'd love that. I think we should try that.
But speaking of the special effects, though, it reminded me a lot, like Jeremy sort of said it, movies of the time. Matrix had been out for a while by that point, so bullet time was a thing, and many movies had done that, tried that. Even Fight Club did it for one shot for the very beginning. So by that point, it's well polished. It looks good. I like the special bullets with all the decorations on it and carvings, and they look neat. And the idea of curving a bullet, cool idea. And that's one thing I can't remember. Was that actually in the comics or not? The curving of the bullets?
If I'm not mistaken, and Jeremy, please correct me if I'm wrong, because you obviously recently read it, and I haven't had time. Is it in the book? 'Cause I know that there were a lot. The gun firing skills were incredible. Like I know that he developed this ability from the comic to be able to shoot from almost any direction, upside down, left, right, all around, while screwing all kinds of different things. So this guy became multitask with a gun. But was that curved bullet in the comics?
No, not like this. This was. I mean, because you couldn't. I mean, I guess you could, but the way this was done, it was clearly to show that they can film a cool, slow curving bullet. I mean, it's there.
The Israeli gun was the best. I don't know if you guys saw the one that turned corners. That was the first time I'd actually seen that. And just so you know, outside of that, G.I. Joe followed up, but that was the first time that you'd ever seen a gun turn corners. It's a little fun fact that yeah,
Yeah, it's a real thing too.
it is a real thing. It's a real Israeli attachment to weapons.
So let's start. We've talked about a couple scenes in this movie and talked about a couple things we liked in there. What's your favorite scene?
Oh, I just thought the best scene was the jumping through the when he puts his when the lady gets shot and they're shooting when the assassins are shooting from the building. The car scene was amazing. I thought that was a great and well shot scene. But I gotta say that jumping out of that glass was so dope. And just running because it really showed that it wasn't just, and that's probably what was both awesome and also kind of taking some because is he the only one? I guess the fact is that you guys keep mentioning Wesley's superpower, slowing down time, but this guy did the same thing. This guy did the same darn thing, slowed it down and ran like was turning dresses around and papers in the air.
Well, in the movie, they do mention that some people have this ability. They don't say it's just you and your father. Now, mind you, at that point in the movie, we believe that man was Wesley's father.
Yeah.
And so we would think that has it. Now, in the comic book, he can do it because he's wearing Spider-Man's boots.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of like standard action scenes. The ones that stand out to me are the ones that you don't see anywhere else. So like the you mentioned the rat trainer guy or whatever, and you could tell they're foreshadowing something where he's like, yeah, look, if you feed them, nitroglycerin or whatever, they explode. And you're like, oh, that's going to come back. And it does like 1,000-fold. And it's the best scene in the whole movie, in my opinion. I loved it. It's totally ridiculous and over the top, but it was, I've never seen anything like that before. So I did enjoy that. Also, I know this isn't really a scene. You've mentioned the loom. I thought that the loom scene was cool where he's using it for training. That's all well and good. The actual loom that tells them who to kill is the dumbest plot point of any movie ever. I did not like it. I mean, again, maybe it's because I was reading this trade, and so once you get past like the second page of the second comic, the movie just diverges. And instead of being like, oh yeah, well we're this group of villains that have taken all the superheroes, no. Instead, it was just like, well, we have this magical loom that gives us names. That's who we kill. It's fate. You're like, what? This is the stupidest thing ever. Now that is part of the plot where someone's clearly tweaking that to their own game, but it still means at some point there was a magical loom that made names. And no one knows where they come from. No one knows who made the loom. None of that's given away. There's just a magical loom that weaves in names in binary, and it tells you who to kill. I at that point I was just staring forward. I'm like, this is easily, if not the worst, definitely the dumbest movie that we will probably review in the entire time we do this podcast. This is the stupidest plot point ever.
Oh my gosh. You just did a Billy Madison. I don't know if you know that.
I don't.
We're all dumber for having watched it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Well, and it's not the dumbest part of the movie. That's the other thing. Is there's dumber parts of this movie, but I was like, at that point, I'm like, this is officially just ridiculous. Like, it was already ridiculous beforehand, but in a totally movie way. At this point, where it was like, did they write this on the back of a napkin? And like, we're not rewriting this. We're done. This is all we're doing. This is it.
Okay, so I've got some tidbits for you guys. So there is an alternate opening to this movie. It's on the Blu-ray. I have watched it. And essentially, are you familiar with Assassin's Creed?
I am.
Oh, good. So it essentially, instead of having the text go across the screen to explain the backstory and the loom and all that sort of stuff and setting the movie up like an action movie or a adventure movie, instead it actually shows the order during the medieval period where they're giving an assassin a name from the loom, and he must go assassinate the king. And he's like, but we love the king. And he goes, and the king's on parade and decides to assassinate him because he can see the Black Death is on his face. And he decides to curve his arrow from his crossbow around the head of a small baby child to assassinate the king. And that's to set up how old this order is. And they've had this magical ability to curve weapons forever.
I don't need that, but I would have liked to know that the loom is that old. That would make me feel at least slightly better than that in 1994, whenever this movie's supposed to take place, that there's all this magical loom that people are using to kill. I don't know. I was so annoyed by
that
the
the magical loom is located in New Jersey. I mean, so that alone just makes the rest of it all.
And it's upstairs or on a bunch of other looms that are not magical. They're just looms.
Another interesting thing for you. Now, I don't know how connected it is, but are you familiar with the White Wolf role-playing series?
I unfortunately am.
Good. So there's, as you know, there's a section called Mage, like one of the, they had like the Mage, Werewolf, Vampire, all that sort of stuff. In the White Wolf series, Mage, there's an order called the Euthanatori, and they have a loom that spits out fate, and their priests or mages have to go around culling people and killing them off to keep fate in line. And that came out in 1993.
Wow. So I guess maybe the director, a giant Mage fan. Could be.
Maybe. The writer of the movie was like, you know what? I love playing Mage, and I want to see this in a movie.
I only want to read the first issue of this comic and the Mage source book, and then write a book. Write a movie.
Exactly.
Well, and keep in mind, he is Russian Kazakhstan, so he might have actually used the loom growing up. We don't know if he didn't make his own clothes.
I don't even want to go there. One scene I do want to talk about is the train chase scene. You know which one I'm talking about? And I think it's in Europe somewhere.
Yes. Where they drive the car and kind of push it into the train, and everybody kind of blows it down. He's on top of his dad. He's like, I killed my dad.
How many people died in that accident?
Well, and that was supposed to be the purpose of the show. Like the comic was supposed to be like, we can do whatever we want and cover it up. But they did end a lot of lives on that train, didn't they?
They sure did. Interesting thing about that, the car Angelina Jolie was driving, same car from Harry Potter.
Oh, now it all ties together.
It all comes together.
You mean it all weaves together in the loom?
And Chris, did you know you just pulled that was what we call a joke long grenade? Like you literally just dropped that down and then fused it for about 5 to 10 minutes down the line. So that was phenomenal.
It's called a callback. Now, supposedly there is actually an alternate ending to this movie. I looked as much as I could. I could not find it, but supposedly there was a different ending to this thing.
I've heard about that. It's when after you get to the part where they show you the loom, you turn it off and you watch something else.
How did you guys feel about that wall break, that fourth wall break at the very, very end when he turns the camera and speaks directly to the audience?
I think Timmer read the last page of the last comic and was like, we can put that in. That's the one thing we can do.
Yeah. It didn't bother me. At this point, I really did ruin my experience with the movie reading the trade. Again, not that I think the trade's missing ever. There are problems with that too, but like this was so different that by the end of this movie, I was just happy that it was done. So it didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, this movie really did feel like Fight Club meets Harry Potter. I mean, it was all over the place. It really was. And I think you're right, Jeremy. and I know we'll get the reviews and our opinions about it later, but I think my mistake too was reading the trade now while watching this movie. Now I had seen this movie in the past, so I knew what I was getting into, but reading the trade at the same time, yeah, it really messes with your head for this thing.
Gentlemen, I'm gonna tell you, I'm quite impressed that you can both put your eyes on reading material and a movie at the same time. That's a multitasking sort of cinema. Yeah, it's an amazing thing that you guys are able to put together there for your multitasking abilities.
Now, for example, in this case, I watched the beginning of the movie and I got to the part where, he goes, you see his office for the first time or whatever, and he meets Angelina Jolie's character at the drugstore. And at that point, I stopped the movie, I paused it, and I read the first part of the trade up to where he meets the fox. And I was like, okay, this is not far off. It's different, but it's a filmable version of what I just saw. Great. And then I watched the next 50 minutes of the movie, and I read 2 pages of the trade, and I was like, what the hell is going on? None of this is in here. This is not at all what happened. And it just went from there. So that was my mistake. I think if I would have watched this whole movie from start to finish and then read the trade, I think I would have a better opinion on the movie. But instead, I kind of ruined both experiences. So I don't know if I'm going to like the trade either when I finish it. I'm near the end of it. I didn't finish it all yet because it was so different from this movie. I went through it quickly, but I didn't read it. I flipped through it after the first half because I was like, the rest of this isn't in here at all. This has nothing to do with anything, including they have a twist about his father because his father does die at the beginning, just like in this movie. Totally different twist. Just a shockingly different branch of how this movie is compared to the source material. There's a lot of times where you can say, okay, they left these things out, but ultimately it's the same story start to finish. This is not. The trade ends with him basically just as this ultimate assassin. He's now able to move on to something else where they'd bring him in as a character. And in this movie ends, and it's kind of like, what the hell's he do now? I don't know what he's going to do with his life ever again.
We'll probably not go back to that same train.
No. Not to the same job. He's not. I don't know what he's going to do. Did he get his money back? I have no idea. I have no clue.
Well, he got to keep his dad's gun. I mean, that alone, that's a pretty damn decent gun. Those bullets were pretty fresh.
He had millions of dollars in the bank to having $17, and then he kills a guy, and it ends. You're like, well, did he get his money back? Otherwise, he's going to go back to his shitty job, but now he's really good with guns. What is this going to help him? This has made his life worse.
Well, totally, the source material I think is very edgelord, very edgy for the sake of edgy. But how do you guys feel about the tone of this movie?
Slightly dark, slightly light. I think it was a bit. That's part of the messiness of the movie. I mean, I think the guy, Timur, as I said, my background on this guy is watching the other 2 movies that I thought were brilliant. It's just a little bit edgy, but it's Angelina Jolie. She's hot. I like some of the scenes. They're able to shoot those well. And again, I think, from that perspective, it's pretty decent. Some of the characters, the fight scenes were good, but it's not bad. Like a watered down John Wick. Here's another version, a little watered down John Wick.
Yeah, it's a watered down version of what I would have expected from this. Not even based on the trades, but how it starts and just the kind of movie it feels like it's going to be. It does feel a little watered down, except for that incredible rat scene. Everything else, though, not as good as what I expected.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, I love that rat scene. It's over the top action. But you're right. It's totally, it shifts a lot. I like that phrase you used, Fergel, watered down John Wick.
Well, let me ask you a question real quick. Were all those rats that had the little bombs on them, were their balls hanging out of the back? Because those rats had big balls. I don't know if you guys noticed that. There's a lot of big balled rats running around.
I don't watch movies the same way you do. I did not notice those.
Fergel, this is our 10th episode together, and I have learned you see things I don't see. You focus on things that I don't focus on, and I love you for it, man, but that ain't me. That ain't me.
Well, now I'm going to watch it again. I'm going to watch it again now.
You're going to come back to me. You're going to be like, those little rats have big ass balls, and it's going to show up in your face, and it's not going to go away because it's not like you were looking for it, but you're like, either are they all pregnant or are they just all big balls on the back of the rats?
See, I look for details like the fact that there are 3 people in this movie who went off to play characters in the MCU, like John McAvoy plays Professor X, Chris Pratt is Star-Lord, Angelina Jolie is Thena from Marvel, but for the Marvel, sorry. But I don't look at the anatomy of rats. I'm sorry.
Well, you guys have mentioned it enough, so I figured let's deconstruct the rat scene.
We've mentioned the rat scene, but not the anatomy of the rat themselves.
Well,
so
they were a big part of that.
I don't even know where to go from there.
Yeah, no, I'm not quite sure what we do from here.
Well, given that the rats move fast, let's talk about the pacing.
That's the only thing that moves fast. This movie is not paced well. The beginning is fine. Like again, up to the point where he meets Angelina Jolie, the Fox, I guess, at the drugstore, it's fine. But then like the training goes on way too long. I think it needs to be there as long as it is to some levels because it is kind of showing how he's getting better at this. But then from there, I felt like the movie's just on a train, like a bullet train to the end. And then it I don't know. There's too much going on that it doesn't make any sense after he gets in the organization, and then it's just tons of stuff really fast. There's he's got his mission. He probably had more than the one, but who knows. And then from there he goes straight to, well, I'm going to find the guy who killed my father, and from there it just goes to, well, that's not really what's happening, and then the movie ends. Like it's not paced very well at all.
Agreed. I think the training had to be there. I think they probably put a lot of effort into that training piece. And you could also kind of tell the arc of Wesley from going, I'm sorry, to sorry. Like when he's flipping the car over and they're doing the whole Corvette and he's killing the guy in the limo. It's like, sorry. So it sort of takes him from, a guy who doesn't really care about himself to a guy who's like, yeah, I'll shoot you upside down on a Corvette on top of you just to make sure you're okay. So it just, and then it jumps and then it races to kill your dad, and then it's not your dad, and then it's this other guy who comes and says, well, your dad was actually trying to save everything, and then it's like, oh, let me just get all my dad's stuff and find a bunch of big bald rats.
Yeah, this is an action movie, right? This is not Shakespeare. This is not The Godfather, but I think the movie does need some space for breathing. I think we could spend some more time with the characters. We've mentioned before how there's really only 3 characters in this whole movie, right? There's Wesley, Fox, and what was it, the professor? I think it's whoever Morgan Freeman was playing.
He was supposed to be playing the professor, yeah. The only other notable person in that scene.
Everyone else is, in fact, there's the final scene of where he confronts the professor, right? And all the assassins are in a big circle around the room, guns pointed at Wesley. And the professor's like, if I had followed through with this, I would have had to kill you, Fox. I would have had to kill you, this guy. And at some point he goes, and you, and just says no names and just throws cards. And I'm like, that's how I feel about this movie right now. It's just, there's nothing, right? There's nothing.
Well, then Morgan Freeman redeems it and says, will someone shoot this motherfucker and let's get back to the job of the fraternity. That was cool.
That was cool. Completely side note here. Morgan Freeman, I've been trying to find a good place to put this in there, but did you know at the time he was filming this movie, he was also filming The Dark Knight, because they're being filmed in the same city at the same time. So he would go from one set to the next. And Mark Millar actually was a big Batman fan, snuck into the set and got kicked out.
Which makes sense.
Unrelated to pacing, but just want to put that out there. For me, the themes of this movie, it's a standard chosen one movie, right? He's the chosen one. He's got to save the day, confront his father, all that sort of stuff. There's nothing really too deep about this movie.
See, the only reason I don't think it feels like a chosen one movie is, again, at the end of the movie, there's this sense of just emptiness. Like there's nothing, like, a lot of time those chosen movies end, like The Matrix, right? He's now like, kind of like the leading this group of freedom fighters, right? And whatever happens in the future, he's there. This, it's just like, yeah, he killed this guy and now he's around. And that's it. Like, there's no, if they would have been more like history of the Loom, maybe it would have been like, and now he's going to go after this group historically, or, hey, there's this other group that's been trying to, to deal with these assassants. I'm going to go after them or something. But instead, it's just like, I hated this one guy. Well, I took him out. The end. Like, okay, great. So I don't know. It didn't feel like it had the chosen one theme at the start. I felt more like that same kind of idea where he's got special skills no one else has because of just his abilities, right? From birth, not that he has a special suit or that he was, trained for years as a ninja. Like, no, it's just, he has these special skills, so he's better at all these things. That's why they picked him. But then, and maybe it's because part of the story is they picked him not really because he had these special skills because they wanted to keep him, but because they knew he could take out the one guy they couldn't. And then they were going to get rid of him too or whatever, right? But instead, it just had this really kind of emptiness towards the end.
That actually sounded like the exact plot of the movie. Jeremy, you just like literally summed that up in about a sentence.
Well, then we wasted the previous 20 minutes of this podcast. I could have just started with that.
Well, I mean, to your point, I think theme-wise, I mean, the movie I think it would have had a better shot if it wasn't called Wanted. I honestly think it would have probably gotten more play because I think just like Kick-Ass and just like Kingsman, Mark Millar, just like Frank Miller, has a following, has a cult. He has guys that love his stories, that follow his stories, and think he does great work. And I think, I think this movie was done in because of the fact that he decided to name it and bought the rights on one comic book without fleshing out the story. And fun fact, most movies today post that point, especially if they're bought from source material, do not do that anymore. So you notice that, at least we learned a lesson from that one. So they tend to be like, like 8 Million Genies is a newly optioned Amazon thing. They've got the 8 series out, so now you're going to get a great story that's actually based on the book. But yeah, this movie just kind of falls under its own weight. It's a good movie, great big actors, which is, if I must make one unnecessary statement, is the most amazing thing about this movie. How does a first-time director get Morgan Freeman, Angelina Jolie, James McAvoy, and like a bunch of other common? I mean, how does he get these people to all show up in one movie?
I do not know, but it's funny you say that. I think that's the only reason this movie did well is because it had the star power of Anna Jolie, who was on a firestorm of great movies, of action movies, and Morgan Freeman. I think the two of them is what sold this movie. This movie did very well in the box office. It cost them $100 million to make it. It made $350 million back on it. So
it's better than Shazam.
Better than Shazam. It's better than some other movies we reviewed. So I think it's the star power that actually allowed this movie to get out there, but it is not like the source material. And at the same time, I don't know if that would have worked anyway. So I think we should just jump into it, guys. Should people go out and look for this movie?
No.
We'll do that together. Jeremy, I echo you on that one. We'll do that together, my friend. If you happen upon it in a Goodwill while you're searching for other bargains, yes. If it happens upon TBS on your Sunday evening or Sunday afternoon, yes. But if it is something where you're like, let's go get this movie, no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, this is the dollar bin, I think is a good way to put it. So if this movie were to happen to be, would you guys go out and rewatch this movie yourself? I mean, Jeremy, you bought the movie. You got to get your money's worth.
I bought it for $2. By recording this podcast, I made my money back tenfold. I will not watch this again. There is no reason to watch this again. I will probably sneak it back into that same Goodwill.
That I'd like to see a video of. No, I probably wouldn't watch this again. Like I did watch it. I've watched it actually so many times. This is a reoccurring movie on TBS. It flips through the 32. It's a my era, 235, 236. So TBS and TNT. This thing goes back and forth. So or even Sci-Fi Network. It shows up one of those stations at least once a month.
For me, it depends. If I walked into a room and it was on and it was showing certain action scenes, I might watch those action scenes. They did a great job with some of those things, but would I sit there and commit another 90 minutes of my life to it? Probably not.
This is the exact kind of movie that if you're flipping channels and you come to it and you don't know what it is, you're going to sit at it, you're going to stare at it, and we're going to watch it because you're not going to believe what's happening. And then after it's over, you're going to do any kind of research to see what this movie was to make sure you never watch it again.
So we're definitely not going to give this one a thumbs up.
So, well, based on our rating system, who knows? So should there be a remake of this, or should they expand the universe?
I'm going to say that, and I'm going to be the lone voice of opposition to both of you two. I think this movie could be redone into a movie. I think the boys have their own lane. I think there are a lot of supervillain movies that have their own lane. Thunderbolts is now a thing, but even though the guy left from Century, so there's a lot of villain movies. But I think this movie, even if it's a 5-part TV show, even if Netflix is like, let's just take this and do something with it, I think it's gonna, it has potential.
Yeah, actually, Fergel, you brought up a great point earlier. Now that everyone is kind of so oversaturated with superheroes, I think that the source material for this could be, even with a low budget and a kind of a tongue-in-cheek version, would still do okay. I do think this would be better if they redid this based closer on the source material, whether or not it's done in a serious fashion or not. Does this specific version of this story need to be remade? No, not at all.
I personally believe that you're right, Jeremy. The current version of Wanted, just let it fall away and be forgotten about in a Goodwill somewhere. For the current source material, I just think there's just too many problems with the source material for adaptation into a movie. I mean, you could use it, steal from it, borrow from it, but I mean, there's literally a character there called Shithead.
Which is awesome. He's made of so much shit.
Made of 666 pieces of shit, to be exact, and one of which is Hitler's.
A little Ed Jane in there, I believe.
So I think that in itself, you could borrow elements from, but to go for a full-on like Watchmen sort of usage of it, I don't think that'd fly too well. So let's go to the ratings, guys, in the Fergel patent system. How would you rate this movie?
I'm gonna rate this the Billy Madison thumbs down. I watched the movie; it was good. I'm dumber for it, and God help us all.
I'm also going to give it a thumbs down, but I will put 2 giant mouse balls on the bottom.
I knew that was coming.
So, just for the aggregated spreadsheet I'm putting together, do mouse balls make it go lower than a thumbs down or higher than a thumbs down?
It goes higher than the regular thumbs down because, again, that one scene I'd highly recommend people finding on YouTube, or it's short enough you could probably find it on a TikTok. Just find the mouse scene from Wanted, and you'll have the best time that you could.
And
possibly
because
have.
I've said mouse balls at least 3 times, you will not help but look at those mouse balls.
I thought you meant they were going to get summoned like Beetlejuice. Okay.
And with that, I'll give it a thumbs down with no extra color around that one. Why don't we jump into our mailbag?
Oh boy! After what we just did, I'm sure people are still listening to hear about this mailbag.
I hope they are. For those who, or for our listeners out there, on our website, www.movie-smash.com, at the very, very bottom of the form, there's a form where you can put in any question, suggestion, movie recommendation to us, or just send us a random question. And we have one for today. Oh, Jeremy, this one will hit you right in the heart. So this message comes from Jeremy's grandmother.
Oh boy, this is going to be a dark one. This is a
Actually,
dark one.
Jeremy, your grandmother left us a message. That is absolutely phenomenal.
She did.
From the other side, no matter which grandmother we're talking about.
It says your grandpa and I are used to love watching Tank Girl. Please review that. And also, the audio quality has been notably improved. We're so proud of you.
Oh, well, that's good. So that's all Chris. The audio quality is all Chris. He's done a great job finding this new program we're recording on, and I've given editing over to Chris. He's done a much better job than I do. So I'm glad that that other people are appreciating it. I 100% do. And my grandparents did like Tank Girl, so I will keep that under
Your
consideration.
grandparents liked Tank Girl?
My grandparents had no idea what Tank Girl was. They were corn farmers. They didn't know anything about Tank Girl.
That's just phenomenal. Well, to Jeremy's grandparents, thank you for some amazing feedback. That's all I can say.
So, with that, guys, what are you guys working on right now, or what are you currently reading?
Just well-needed time off is kind of what I'm doing. Just trying to get a well-needed little bit of time off, and I'm actually reading Hellboy versus Batman.
And Jeremy?
I'm always recording more episodes of Retrovaniacs. We have a ton of listener requests to go through. We're hitting a bunch on the N64. So if you're an N64 fan, check out Retrovaniacs, available anywhere you get your podcast.
And I am working on, not really working on a couple things. First off, for those who follow us on Facebook and Instagram, you probably have noticed me put some clips up there, some of the show with some scenes that we're talking about. There's also a YouTube channel for it as well. I recommend go take a look at that. Go take a peek. Actually, I do want to ask you guys one thing. You know me, I'm a big data guy. I got to say, YouTube gives us a ton of data, right? About sort of how people found us, why they found us. And I just want to ask you guys, what do you think the #1 search term was that people found us with?
I'm hoping it's blue cock based on our, I was going to say based on, I think we had the same
Jeremy,
guess.
I was saying blue dick, large blue dick. That was exactly, I was literally, I don't know what happened there, but we were simpatico. I mean, we may have just became brothers at that point. I don't know what just happened.
Okay, so here are the top 5 search word terms, I kid you not, that people use to find us. First off, cauliflower rice.
Okay, that makes sense. We talk about that a lot.
Henry Rollins.
Sure.
Reacher.
Yeah, I can understand because I do look like Reacher.
Aaron Donald.
Don't know who that is, but he clearly big fan.
And last one, AMV. Just the letters AMV.
AMV. Now I'm just going to have to figure out if there's an anagram in that.
I think it means anime music video, according to my son. So
better than what I was going to guess. So we'll go with that.
It was probably going to end in big blue cock somehow. We were going to find the words for AMV to make a big blue cock.
I am always impressed by how you guys can insert that into anywhere.
And that's it for the show. This was a good time.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the show, please give us a review, share with your friends, and if you want us to drop us a note, tell us how we are wrong, or give us a movie suggestion, just visit us at movie-smash.com, and thank you for listening.
If you enjoyed the show, please give us a review and share with your friends. If you want to drop us a note, tell us where we were wrong, or give us a movie suggestion, visit us at movie-smash.com.